The door never opened, not once all day. I remember sitting at my kitchen table, the afternoon light casting long shadows across the empty place settings I'd arranged hours earlier. 3 plates, 3 sets of silverware, 3 glasses filled with ice that had long since melted. My hands, weathered from decades of working with wood, trembled slightly as I checked my watch for the 100th time. 7:58 p.m. Mother's Day was almost over, and none of my 3 sons had called, visited, or even sent a text message. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you're listening from. My name is Robert Miller. I'm 76 years old, a retired carpenter, and this is the story of how I became both father and mother to my 3 boys, only to discover that family isn't always defined by blood. It's been almost 40 years since my Helen passed away. I can still see her face sometimes, especially in the soft light of early morning, that gentle smile, those knowing eyes that could see right through me. We were supposed to grow old together, watching our boys become men, bouncing grandchildren on our knees. Instead, I found myself alone with 3 young boys. Michael was 10, Jonathan 8, and little Eric just 6. "You'll remarry," my sister-in-law told me at the funeral. "The boys need a mother." But I never did. Instead, I learned to be both parents. I worked at Wilson's woodshop during the day, crafting furniture that other families would gather around. At night, I'd take odd jobs, repairing neighbors' cabinets, building bookshelves for the local library, anything to add a few more dollars to our savings. While other men my age went fishing or watched football games, I was learning to iron school shirts, bake birthday cakes, and explain to my youngest why Mommy wasn't coming back. "But who's going to tuck me in?" Eric had asked that first night, his small face pinched with confusion. "I am," I'd told him, my voice breaking just slightly. "I'll tuck you in every night, buddy, I promise." And I kept that promise. For years, I juggled everything: work, home, school meetings, doctor's appointments, sports practices. I taught the boys to shave, to change a tire, to respect women. I sat up nights with fevers and nightmares. I saved every penny to put them through college. Michael became a successful investment banker in Boston, Jonathan, an attorney in Chicago, Eric, a software engineer in San Francisco. I was so proud of them. Still am, in a way. "Dad, you gave us everything," Michael once told me at his college graduation. His arm was around my shoulder, and I remember feeling that it had all been worth it. Every sleepless night, every skipped vacation, every gray hair. "We'll always be there for you," Jonathan promised when I helped him move into his first apartment, "just like you were for us." But as the years passed, the visits became less frequent, the phone calls shorter. They had important jobs, busy schedules, families of their own. I understood that, I really did. But there were times when the silence in my house was so complete, I could hear the clock ticking in the hallway, counting away the seconds of my solitary life. Last Mother's Day was the breaking point. It had always been a difficult day for me, a reminder of what we'd all lost. In the early years, I'd make it special for the boys, telling stories about Helen, looking through photo albums. As they grew older, Mother's Day became a day when they would come home and we'd visit Helen's grave together, then have dinner at the house. It was our tradition. But last year, I woke up early and spent the morning preparing their favorite meal: pot roast with garlic mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, and Helen's famous apple pie for dessert. I set the table for 4, one place for Helen, always, and waited, and waited, and waited. By 6 o'clock, I began calling them. No answer from Michael. Jonathan's phone went straight to voicemail. Eric texted back at 6:30, "Sorry, Dad, crazy busy weekend. Talk soon." Talk soon. As if Mother's Day was just any other Sunday. I sat there with the food growing cold, staring at the empty chairs. All those years of sacrifice, of putting them first, of being everything they needed, and they couldn't spare one day, one phone call for the man who had given them his life. They forgot, I whispered to the silent room, to Helen's empty chair. My voice sounded strange in the quiet house. They forgot about me. Something shifted inside me then. A lifetime of understanding, of making excuses, of accepting less than I deserved. It all crystallized into a cold clarity. I stood up slowly, gathered the untouched plates, and scraped their contents into the trash. Then I washed each dish methodically, dried them, and put them away. If they can forget me, I said to myself, then I can forget them too. The next morning I called Thomas Garcia, my attorney, and one of the few friends I'd managed to keep over the years. I need to change my will, I told him. Can I come in today? Thomas didn't ask questions over the phone. He'd known me long enough to understand that I wasn't a man who made impulsive decisions. When I arrived at his office, his expression was concerned but professional. Robert, it's been 5 years since we last updated your estate planning? I nodded, lowering myself into the chair across from his desk. My knees weren't what they used to be. That's right. When Eric got married, I wanted to include his wife in the inheritance. Thomas nodded, pulling out my file. And now? I took a deep breath. I want to remove all 3 of my sons as beneficiaries completely. Thomas's pen paused mid-air. That's significant, Robert. May I ask why? I didn't cry. I was past tears by then. Past tears. I simply told him about Mother's Day, about the years of growing distance, about how they took my support when they needed it, but couldn't give me even the small courtesy of remembering the one day that had meant so much to all of us. When I finished, Thomas was quiet for a long moment. I understand, he said finally. But Robert, this is your life's work we're talking about. Your homes, your savings, your workshop, everything you've built. Are you certain you want to disinherit your children entirely? They're not children anymore, Thomas. They're grown men who've made their choices. I leaned forward. And yes, I'm certain. Then who do you want as your beneficiary? I smiled for the first time that day. Have you ever met James Wilson? James had come into my life 6 months earlier. I'd been at Peterson's Hardware looking for a specific Japanese hand plane when I noticed a young man struggling to decide between 2 sets of chisels. The maple handles will feel better after a long day of work, I'd told him, unable to resist offering advice. Walnut looks prettier, but maple's kinder to your hands. He'd thanked me with genuine gratitude, and somehow we'd ended up talking tools for nearly an hour. James was 25, worked as a mechanic's assistant, and dreamed of studying engineering. He'd lost both parents in a car accident when he was 12 and had been raised by his grandmother, who had passed away the previous year. I'm on my own now, he'd told me with a shrug that tried to hide his loneliness. But I'm figuring it out. Something about his quiet determination reminded me of myself at that age. Before I knew it, I'd invited him to see my workshop, and a friendship had been born. Over the months, James would stop by on weekends. I taught him how to use my lathe, how to recognize quality wood, how to let the grain guide your hands. He was a natural, hungry to learn, respectful of the craft. When he mentioned his dream of engineering school, I'd offered him a small loan for his first semester's tuition. I'll pay you back every cent, mister. Miller, he'd promised, his eyes bright with determination. I know you will, son, I'd replied, the word slipping out before I could catch it. James hadn't seemed to mind. Every month since, he'd brought me an envelope with cash inside, never missing a payment, often including a small jar of his homemade jam or a loaf of bread as a thank you. And on Mother's Day, while my own sons forgot my existence, James had appeared at my door with a simple cake and a card. I know today must be hard for you, he'd said, awkward but sincere. My grandma always said that grief doesn't go away, it just changes shape. Thought you might like some company. I'd invited him in, grateful for his presence, though I didn't tell him I'd been expecting my sons. We sat drinking coffee, eating cake, and talking about a bookcase he was building. When he left, he'd hugged me, a quick, almost embarrassed embrace. Thanks for everything, Mr. Miller, he'd said. You're the closest thing to family I've got these days. Now, sitting in Thomas's office, I explained about James. He reminds me of myself at that age, I said. Hard-working, honest, grateful for every opportunity. And he shows up, Thomas. He remembers what matters. Thomas nodded slowly. So you want to leave everything to James? My main house and my workshop, yes. The tools especially. He'll use them, appreciate them. My savings, I want to go to a foundation for young people without families who want to study engineering or trades. James can help administer it. And your sons. I felt a twinge then, not regret exactly, but acknowledgement of what I was doing. They'll get a letter, nothing else. Over the next hour, Thomas and I drafted the new will. I was specific about everything: the houses, the land, the savings accounts, the collections of rare tools I'd gathered over a lifetime. My estate wasn't enormous by some standards, but it was substantial, worth over $1 million in total. More than enough to change a young man's life and help others like him. I'll need to record a video statement, Thomas explained, to establish that you're of sound mind and making this decision without coercion. Your sons might contest the will. I nodded. Let them try. I've kept journals for years, documenting every missed birthday, every unanswered call, every time I needed help and they were too busy. I have receipts for every loan, every down payment, every bailout. The courts can see exactly what kind of sons they've been. The video was simple. I sat in Thomas's office, stated my name, the date, and explained that I was changing my will of my own free will, without any pressure or manipulation. I explained my reasons calmly, without anger. My sons have made it clear through their actions that our family bonds are no longer important to them, I said to the camera. I am merely acknowledging the reality they have created. 2 weeks later, I invited James to dinner. Over Helen's pot roast, the same meal my sons had missed, I told him what I'd done. "Mr. Miller, I can't. This is too much," he stammered, his fork frozen halfway to his mouth. "Your sons have made their choices," I finished for him, "just as I've made mine." But they're your family," he insisted. I looked at him across the table, this young man who called me every week, who brought me soup when I had the flu, who listened to my old stories with genuine interest. "Family isn't always blood, James," I said quietly. "Sometimes it's the people who want to be in your life, who make the effort to show up, who remember what matters. You've been more of a son to me in 6 months than my own boys have been in years." James's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything. Just promise me you'll finish school, that you'll use my tools to build beautiful things, and that you'll help other young people who don't have anyone to believe in them." "I promise," he whispered. I didn't tell my sons about the changes to my will. There didn't seem to be any point. Our conversations had become so infrequent and superficial that there was never a natural opening to say, "By the way, I've disinherited all of you." Instead, I continued my quiet life, spending time with James, working in my shop, occasionally getting a quick call from one of the boys, usually when they needed something. 6 months later, I developed a cough that wouldn't go away. The doctor's expression told me everything before he even spoke the words. "Stage 4 lung cancer, Mr. Miller. I'm sorry." I didn't call my sons right away. Instead, I focused on getting my affairs in order, on spending what time I had left doing what I loved. James drove me to my appointments, stayed with me during the worst days of treatment, learned to cook Helen's recipes so I could eat the foods that comforted me. It was James who finally insisted I tell my sons. "They deserve to know, Mr. Miller," he said gently. "Whatever's happened between you, they should have the chance to say goodbye." I knew he was right. I called each of them, left messages when they didn't answer. Michael called back first, his voice immediately shifting to concern when I told him, "Dad, why didn't you tell us sooner? We'll fly out right away." Jonathan and Eric made similar promises, and true to their word, all three arrived within days. Michael with his wife, Jonathan alone, he was between divorces, and Eric with his wife and their 2 children, my grandchildren whom I barely knew. The reunion was strained at first. They were shocked by how much weight I'd lost, by the oxygen tank that now accompanied me everywhere. They were even more shocked by James, who moved comfortably through my home, knowing where everything was kept, clearly familiar with my routines and needs. "Who exactly are you?" Michael asked him bluntly on the second day, when James arrived with groceries and my prescription refills. "I'm a friend of your father's," James replied simply, continuing to unpack the bags. "A friend," Michael repeated, exchanging glances with his brothers. "And how long have you been friends?" "About a year now," James said. "Your dad's been teaching me carpentry." "How nice," Jonathan said, in a tone that suggested it was anything but. That night, after James had gone home, my sons confronted me in the living room. "Dad, who is this guy, really?" Eric asked. "He's here every day. He has a key to your house. He's acting like he's family." I looked at my youngest son, the successful software engineer who hadn't visited me in 3 years. "James is someone who cares about me," I said simply. "He shows up. He remembers what matters." "What's that supposed to mean?" Michael demanded. I was tired. The cancer treatments took everything out of me, but some conversations can't be postponed. "It means that James was here on Mother's Day when all 3 of you forgot. It means he calls me every week just to talk, not because he needs money for a down payment or help with legal bills or a loan for a startup. It means he knows I take my coffee with 1 sugar, that Thursday is my physical therapy day, that your mother's apple pie recipe uses lard in the crust, not butter." My sons stared at me, a mixture of guilt and defensiveness on their faces. "Dad, we've been busy," Jonathan began. "Our careers." "I was busy too," I interrupted, my voice suddenly strong. "I was busy raising 3 boys alone, working 2 jobs, making sure you had everything you needed. I was busy showing up for every game, every graduation, every moment that mattered. I was busy being your father." The silence that followed was deafening. "We didn't know you felt this way," Eric said finally. "You never asked," I replied. Over the next few days, there were tears, recriminations, apologies. My sons tried in their way to make amends. They took turns driving me to appointments. They cooked meals badly. They showed me pictures of their lives, their children, their homes. They promised things would be different, but I'd heard promises before. "Dad," Michael said on their last day, sitting beside my bed while I rested, "we're going to do better. We'll call more, visit more. You'll see." I smiled at him, taking his hand. I'd like that. What I didn't say was that it was too late to change what I'd already done. The will remained as I'd written it, not out of spite or revenge, but because I'd made a promise to James, to the foundation I was creating. Because some lessons can only be taught through consequences. A month after they left, I took a turn for the worse. James called my sons and they rushed back. This time, they met Thomas, who had come to make final arrangements. "Who are you?" Jonathan asked suspiciously when Thomas introduced himself as my attorney. "I'm an old friend of your father's," Thomas replied, "and his legal representative." The look that passed between my sons spoke volumes. They had always assumed they knew everything about my life, my plans, my future. They were wrong. I died on a Tuesday morning in early spring. The cherry trees I'd planted with Helen were just beginning to bloom outside my window. James was holding one hand, Michael the other. Jonathan and Eric stood at the foot of the bed. My last words were simple: be kind to each other. The reading of the will took place 3 days after the funeral. My sons sat side by side on Thomas's leather couch, confident in their expectations. James sat slightly apart, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. Thomas cleared his throat and began to read. "I, Robert Miller, being of sound mind and body, hereby revoke all previous wills and codicils." The standard legal language continued until Thomas reached the heart of the document. "To my sons, Michael, Jonathan, and Eric Miller, I leave this letter." Thomas handed each of them an identical envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper with my handwriting. "To Michael, Jonathan, and Eric, I leave the same remembrance you gave me on Mother's Day, nothing but silence. May it teach you what it taught me, that family is not defined by blood, but by presence, by showing up when it matters, by remembering what is important. I forgive you for forgetting me. I hope someday you'll understand why I had to forget you too. Love always, Dad. The shock on their faces was profound. Michael was the first to speak. This can't be legal. He was sick. He wasn't thinking clearly. Thomas interrupted gently. Your father recorded a video statement 6 months before his diagnosis, explaining his decision in detail. I can play it for you if you wish. Then who gets everything? Eric demanded. The houses, the money, his workshop? Thomas turned to James. To James Wilson, I leave my primary residence, my workshop, and all tools and equipment therein, with the instruction that he use these gifts to build a life of purpose and craftsmanship. James's quiet tears contrasted sharply with my son's growing anger. The remainder of my estate, Thomas continued, will fund the Helen Miller Foundation for young trades and engineers to provide educational opportunities for young people without family support. James Wilson will serve as the foundation's first director. What followed was predictable. Threats of lawsuits, accusations of manipulation, demands for investigation. But Thomas was thorough. The will was ironclad, my mental competence well documented, my reasons clearly stated. In the end, my sons left empty-handed, not just of inheritance, but of understanding. They hadn't grasped the lesson I'd tried to teach them, that wealth isn't just money or property, but time, attention, presence. That the greatest inheritance is not what you receive, but what you give. James kept his promises. He finished his engineering degree. He maintained my workshop, eventually turning it into a training center for at-risk youth. The Helen Miller Foundation has helped dozens of young people find their way in trades and engineering fields. Sometimes I think about my sons. I wonder if they ever understood. I wonder if they learned to show up for the people they love, to remember what matters. I hope they did. Despite everything, I loved them until the end. But I don't regret my decision, because sometimes the greatest act of love is teaching a hard lesson. Sometimes forgetting is the only way to be remembered, and sometimes family is found in the most unexpected places, like a hardware store on a random Tuesday when a young man asks for advice about chisels and an old carpenter finds the son he thought he'd lost. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To hear the next story, just click on the box on the screen. Thank you so much for listening.